All right, Juice HACCP, prerequisite programs and preliminary steps. Let's get you set up to conduct a hazard analysis and write a plan. David Rawson, lead trainer, International HACCP Alliance for SafeFoodTest.com.
Objectives. In this module, you will learn the role of prerequisite programs. We will learn about GMPs and SSOPs. We'll cover Title 21, Part 117, specifically Subpart B, and we'll cover the preliminary steps involved in developing a HACCP plan. We learned back in Chapter 1 that HACCP is not a standalone system. There'll be many other programs involved to keep your products and processes safe. Let's take a look at a few acronyms. There's quite a few in the food safety world. Good agricultural practices, or GAPS. You need to ensure that the farms that are handling, processing, packing, growing the produce that you're going to be using for your products are doing so in a proper manner. GMP, or good manufacturing practices. You want to make sure that your foundational items are taken care of so when you begin to process food, you're not worried about the people or the environment. And a good way to manage your practices is a sanitation standard operating procedure, which is required in the Juice HACCP regulation. If you incorporate GAPs, GMPs, and SSOPs, your HACCP program, or Hazard Analysis and Critical Control Point program, will run much smoother. When you're navigating regulatory documents, it's very important that you understand all the definitions. Let's take a look at prerequisite programs. Procedures including GMPs and SSOPs that address the operational conditions, providing the foundation for the HACCP system. I like to say prerequisite programs cover the people and the environment, both inside your facility and outside your facility. If you're a juice processor, you are subject to the FDA's current good manufacturing practices. The regulatory document that covers these requirements is Title 21, Part 117, Subpart B. Juice processing facilities are required to be in compliance with Title 21, Part 117, Subpart B. There are other requirements within Title 21, 117. You may not be subject to those if you only process juice. Juice processors would be subject to Subpart A, Subpart B, and Subpart F. Within the Juice HACCP Regulation 21 CFR 120, juice processors are required at a minimum to have sanitation standard operating procedures covering the 8 key sanitation points. Those policies should be incorporating also mandatory monitoring, mandatory correction, and mandatory documentation. So let's do a little review. We learned about the 8 key sanitation elements in Chapter 1. So what are they again? Number 1, safety of water. Number 2, condition and cleanliness of food contact surfaces. Number 3, prevention of cross-contamination. Number 4, maintenance of hand washing, hand sanitizing, and toilet facilities. Number 5, protection from adulterants. Number 6, labeling, storage, and proper use of toxic compounds and chemicals. Number 7, employee health and hygiene. And number 8, exclusion of pests. You must monitor, you must correct any deficiencies, and you must document. So let's take a closer look at the 8 key sanitation elements and where in Title 21, 117 they're covered. So let's start with number 1, safety of water. How do you know your water's safe? What's the source of your water? Could it be contaminated in your plant? Do you have any cross connections or physical links between safe and unsafe water? Do you make ice? You better make sure your ice is safe too. This is covered specifically in Title 21, Part 117.37. The second area of sanitation is condition and cleanliness of food contact surfaces, like your tables, your cutting boards, utensils, gloves, garments, etc. These are covered specifically in Title 21, Part 117.35, 117.40, and 117.80. Area number 3 covers the prevention of cross-contamination and cross-contact. You must consider employee practices, handling, separation of raw ingredients, finished product placement, plant design, movement of product and people, hand washing, and allergen control. These are covered specifically in Title 21, Part 117.10, 117.20, and 117.35. Don't forget the 8 allergens: fish, shellfish, wheat, soy, eggs, milk, tree nuts, and peanuts. Let's look at the definition of cross-contamination real quick. Cross-contamination: the process by which bacteria or other microorganisms are unintentionally transferred from one substance or object to another with harmful effect. And what is cross-contact? Well, cross-contact occurs when an allergen is inadvertently transferred from a food containing an allergen to a food that does not contain the allergen. Here's the 8 common allergens again: fish, shellfish, tree nuts, peanuts, eggs, wheat, soy, and milk. Back to the 8 key sanitation elements. We're on number 4, maintenance of hand washing, hand sanitizing, and toilet facilities. Are you maintaining your hand washing, hand sanitizing, toilet facilities? How often are you maintaining them? Are you maintaining your sewage disposal systems? It's covered specifically in 21 CFR 117.37. Number 5, protection from adulterants. What is an adulterant anyway? Anything that's biological, chemical, or physical that could cause injury, illness, or worst case scenario, death in the absence of its control. So our job is to protect the food packaging, and food contact surfaces from contaminants. It's covered specifically in Title 21, Part 117.10, 117.20, 117.35, 117.40, and 117.80. Let's keep going. Number 6, labeling, storage, and proper use of toxic chemicals and compounds. It's covered in 21 CFR 117.35. Prevent contamination from toxic chemicals and compounds by proper labeling, by proper storage, by proper use. Make sure to keep the safety data sheets available. Number 7, employee health conditions. Controls are necessary to ensure that employee health conditions do not cause food contamination. It's covered in detail in Title 21, Part 117.10. Last but not least, number 8, exclusion of pest. Pest must not be present in the juice processing facility. Covered in Title 21, Part 117.35. We've covered the 8 key elements of sanitation and the requirements for those, but there's a lot of other things you can do. Let's take a look at a few recommended programs, like an environmental monitoring program or a recall and traceability program. Maybe you implement some kind of supplier control program. Be sure to implement a preventative maintenance program and a food defense program This may be required under the new IA rule if you make more than $10 million a year. So I want to make sure you know what's required for juice processors. There are some required prerequisite programs: employee training and training records, current good manufacturing practices in compliance with 21 CFR 117 subpart B, and in the juice HACCP regulation, SSOPs with mandatory monitoring and corrections and record keeping are required, covering the 8 areas of sanitation. Let's cover the training requirements in a little more detail. Title 21, Part 117.4 states, employees must be qualified to perform assigned jobs. They must have training in food hygiene and food safety, and supervisors assure compliance. How do we know the training's been done? Because training records are maintained. And I also want you to make sure that your employees are capable of demonstrating knowledge and understanding of their jobs to regulatory agents and or auditors. Preliminary steps in developing a HACCP plan. HACCP is often thought of in terms of its 7 basic principles. However, HACCP also includes preliminary steps. Failure to properly address the preliminary steps may lead to an ineffective design, implementation, and management of the HACCP plan. So what are the preliminary steps? Number 1, assemble a HACCP team. Number 2, everybody on the team should be able to describe the food and its distribution, know all the details all the time. Number 3, identify the intended use and consumer. Are we serving a high-risk consumer? Number 4, the team develops a process flow diagram, considering all the inputs and all the outputs. And number 5, verify the flow diagram. Get off your butt, walk the floor, and verify the process matches the flow diagram. Assembling a HACCP team. Assembling a team is a very important step in your HACCP program. The team should consist of individuals with different specialties and experience. Although one person can do the whole job, many companies find it's helpful to have a team. Next, describe the food and its distribution. Product description should include the type of juice, how the product is received, how it's stored, how it's shipped, how the product is packaged. The team members should be able to fully describe all the details of your process, all the time. Next, identify the intended use and consumer. Is it ready to drink? Is it intended for further processing? Who's my consumer? Is it the general public or perhaps a high-risk population, like children or the elderly? Now it's time to create our flow diagram. Be sure to include all your inputs and all your outputs, considering even the likelihood of the product could be returned and how you might handle that. Last but not least in our preliminary steps is to verify the flow diagram. Walk the floor, complete the process. Once you've completed that, now you're ready to conduct a hazard analysis. One more time, let's take a look at the preliminary steps. Number 1, assemble your HACCP team. Number 2, describe the food and its distribution. Number 3, identify the intended use and consumer. Number 4, develop a process flow diagram. Number 5, verify your flow diagram. Prerequisite programs and preliminary steps are going to need management commitment, training resources, personnel time, funding, and delegation of authority. These things will be crucial in the proper implementation and development of your HACCP program. This concludes Chapter 3. Please complete the following quiz. You must achieve 75% to go on to the next chapter. review all attachments for this chapter. And if you have any questions, email me at david@123foodhandler.com.